It's finally happened. We had Rogue One, a Star Wars prequel no one wanted or asked for, and now we have Andor, a Star Wars prequel based off of another Star Wars prequel that no one wanted or asked for. We've finally reached the media singularity. Space-time has curved back in on itself, collapsing to a world of infinite prequels. Can we go deeper down this inception hole of prequels? Maybe next Grandma Andor will get a prequel, and we can have a prequel based on a prequel based on a prequel. Our society forever stuck in a loop of prequels going backwards until we have caveman Jedi hitting caveman Sith with rock-powered lightsabers. Anyways, as I'm sure you gathered, I didn't have high hopes for Andor, so it may come as much to a shock to you, as it did to me, that I actually liked the beginning of this show. Yes, to my pleasant surprise, this show had me on board, at least at first. However, when I tell you what I liked about it, I'm not sure it spells good things for the future of the show, let alone the future of Disney, who is determined to continually shove Star Wars prequel shows down our throats to churn out content for Disney+. The latest phase of Marvel has been bad after bad, and I don't think Star Wars is going to be the lifesaver they need. Let's talk about what's good about the show before we get into the bad. The beginning of the show is unapologetically not Star Wars. As the wisest man to have sex with a droid once said,
Star Wars is
creatively bankrupt.
Right off the bat, we're hit with our main character Cass, walking through a rainy cyberpunk city with cyberpunk synth music. A little refreshing, not very Star Wars-like. Cass walks through an alien red light district where alien prostitutes solicit sex like it's alien Amsterdam. Wow, okay, not very Star Wars at all. Cass then enters a brothel and we find out he's trying to find his sister who used to work there. Okay, definitely not very Star Wars. Some guys looking to hoe down get into an argument with Cass and follow him outside looking to shake him down. Turns out they're part of a private police force for the corporation that owns and runs this planet. At first I started rolling my eyes, as we've seen this scene 1,000 times. Some a-holes mess with our hero just so he can beat them up guilt-free and establish that he is in fact a badass renegade. However, with Andor, everything goes horribly wrong. He does beat the guys up and takes one's gun away, but he accidentally kills one of the guys. And we don't even see it. He just headbutts him in the beginning of the fight, and the guy falls out of frame. And that's it. No cutaway showing him hit his head. Nothing. Cass is, of course, surprised by this. The second guy he's beating up is surprised. And we, the audience, are surprised. And you know what? I like it. It all feels very realistic. Just something that happens in a street fight gone wrong. Then his friend starts begging Cass for his life, telling him it was just an accident, and he swears he'll take the blame. And what does Cass, our hero, do? He shoots the man pleading for his life in the face.
You had my curiosity, but now you have my attention.
This is the kind of subversion Rian Johnson can only wet dream about. It's at this point that I'm on board with the show. Though of course, what does this say about Star Wars as a property? If the only reason I like the beginning of the show is that it's so not like Star Wars, you might have to ask, what's the point then? Well, in our current year where everything has to be based off of existing IP, sadly I think this is one of the few ways we actually get new, finger quotes, original content. Every original story has to be retooled to fit some existing IP. Then we meet our villains, or perhaps I should say antagonists, who I really like a lot. First, none of them are Empire, well, not directly. They're all part of this corporation that owns and runs this planet, somewhat independently from the Empire. Although they still serve under and report to them, none of it's fleshed out clearly yet, but so far that's unimportant to the story. We have Cyril Khan, who's a young, mid-level up-and-comer, totally straight-laced by the books, thinks he's totally in the moral right, and cares a lot about order, and sounds suspiciously like Tom Cruise. He strongly feels like it's his duty to investigate the death of 2 security employees of the company. 2 of his co-workers. His boss, however, who I love, is the polar opposite. He's old, tired, cynical, and is much more interested in what's best for the larger picture for the company to do politically, and doesn't care so much for the grunts. He looks at the facts surrounding these 2 deaths, and using some light Yagami levels of logic, correctly determines that it was most likely a fight gone wrong. Lays out all the political reasons it would be bad to publicize the case, and tells Cyril to just make up a fake story about the deaths and move on. The boss then leaves to go off-world to a meeting, and I sincerely hope not only that he comes back into the show, but that we see what the consequences of Cyril ignoring him are. Will the Empire start cracking down on this planet because of how botched Cyril's attempt to capture Cass ends up becoming? I sure hope so. All of Cyril's underlings also seem pretty lazy and don't really care about their job at all. They all look at Cyril like he's some kind of weirdo for how seriously he takes everything. You know, I wonder if the show is setting Cyril up as a Zuko-like character from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I don't mean that he'll have a redemption arc and join the heroes. Nothing like that. that, what I mean is that even though Cyril is the antagonist to Cass, he might also function as a secondary protagonist for the show, with his own host of problems and his own antagonist to face. We'll see going forward. IMDb only has Cyril listed for 3 episodes, which I'm hoping is a mistake, because it would be pretty crazy for this level of fleshing out of a character just to throw him away after 3 episodes. The last important and also awesome bad guy is Sergeant Linus Mosk, the only other guy we've seen besides Cyril who takes his job seriously. Linus and Cyril's first conversation is all about how it's their duty to bring to justice the guy who killed 2 of their coworkers. They both feel like the heads of the corporation don't give a crap about them or lower level employees, and it's their job to look out for them. So we have this very interesting dynamic where even though they're supposed to be the bad guys, they're acting out of loyalty and respect for their fellow workers, even though the 2 killed were unimportant bottom tier employees. It makes our villains empathetic and interesting. I love that our enemies here are not just nameless, faceless stormtroopers or just mustache twirling Imperial officers. No, these are interesting characters with interesting motivations, covering complex, interesting moral questions. For a broad overview, the first 3 episodes follow Cass as he tries to scrounge up enough money to get off planet to avoid the heat coming down on him for 2 murders. He has some kind of Imperial part MacGuffin that's worth a lot, and he's trying to line up a buyer for the part before the Popo come get him. Cass's ex-love interest, Bix, runs some kind of chop shop and sets up through secret channels a buyer. But her current boyfriend, Tim, who's jealous and stupid, rats Cass out to the police. It also keeps cutting to Cass's past where he grew up in some village of all children and teenagers on a world that had some kind of mining accident and was deemed uninhabitable. And although I am curious as to why there are no adults here, there are some major problems with this that we'll get into. The show also spends a lot of time with Cyril as he attempts to track and eventually capture Cass. Now it turns out the buyer of the part is Stellan Skarsgård of all people, and somehow knows who Cass is and wants to recruit him to join the rebels. We're gonna talk about that. Anyways, the last episode so far ends with Cyril's attempt to capture Cass going horribly, horribly wrong. Some additional things I liked was Cass's stuttering robot that requires additional power to lie, this guy's failed attempt to intimidate Cass into paying back a debt, and this random guy who wakes everyone in town up by smacking metal on a clock tower, and he takes his job really seriously. Look, for everyone else, he's just that guy in the clock tower, but for him, it's an art. So far you might be saying, wait, this all sounds good. What's wrong with the show? Well, 2 things, 3 things, and they all start with the letter F. The first is focus. Too much time in this show feels wasted on just world building or character that doesn't really affect the plot in any way. A lot of setups with no payoff. A lot of time is spent in Cass's backstory living with his Lord of the Flies, but we don't actually get any useful information out of it. Where are his parents? What happened to the planet? Besides setting up the fact that yes, Cass has a sister and he got separated from her, it's just setting up a general vibe. A vibe that ultimately has a bizarre and terrible payoff. In episode 3 at the end of this storyline, we learn that Grandma Cass just randomly finds him scavenging the wreckage of an Imperial ship and just kind of kidnaps Cass. Like, what the hell, lady? Imperial troops are coming and she thinks they're gonna kill him, so fair enough. But she doesn't go to see if he has any family on the planet or I don't know, fly back for his sister at some point? She just finds a strange kid dressed up like a native speaking a language she doesn't understand and is like, well, I guess I'll take you home now. I swear, menopause does crazy stuff to ladies. Now, this could be an interesting setup and payoff if we actually saw Cass and Grandma had some weird relationship because of it. Like Cass simultaneously appreciates that she saved him from the Empire and, raised him not in a jungle, but also resents her for separating him from his sister and the Lord of the Flies kids. But we don't get any of that. They only have one scene together so far, and any aspect of this relationship is not explored. So all this backstory seems wasted, as it ultimately only serves to show how Cass got separated from his sister, something that could have been done much quicker. Speaking of sister, I have to bring this up because it pissed Adam off so much. It pissed Adam off so much, he had to call me just to complain about it. And that's what the heck happened to the focus on Cass's sister. The beginning of the show, the entire thing that sets up the core conflict in the show so far is Cass looking for his sister. But that entire plotline is dropped immediately, and all Cass focuses on is escaping the planet because of the police. Kinda makes Cass look like a huge a-hole. He doesn't care about his sister anymore and just wants to save his own skin. A very strange thing to drop, considering I'm assuming Cass will continue to look for his sister in later episodes. It would have been pretty easy for him to get some tip about her whereabouts from that brothel, and then he could have been trying to get the money to get off-world to look for her as well as escape. I don't know, it just seemed like a really weird thing for them to mess up and a really easy thing to correct. Now, Andor has a lot of scenes scenes which set up things that don't pay off. A good example of the lack of focus is a scene where Cass visits a friend from a job he's been skipping out on, and they set up an alibi for where he was the night of the killings. It's a good scene and I like it. However, there's no payoff to any of this. No scene where the cops take his friend and interrogate him, raise the stakes. No scene where this alibi even comes into play or is ever used. Nothing. And because of that, a good scene ultimately becomes pointless. It serves no point in the story other than to establish that Cass has a cool friend, I guess. A cool friend we will probably never see again after episode 3, so setting him up as a character seems pointless. There's a bunch more scenes like this where I'm just scratching my head like, why is this even here? It'll give some minor amount of lore or minor amount of character development, but it's just wasted time for the most part. The second big F-word problem with the show is Force. No, not like the Star Wars Force. Like, too much dumb stuff happens because it's forced into the script. It's weird how there are characters and scenes that are pretty well written, and some that are bafflingly forced and contrived. Mostly in the third episode. In the Lord of the Flies timeline, the kids are setting up to scavenge the downed Imperial ship, when Leader Girl, for no reason, goes into the crash site alone. Why? There's a group of like 20 or more kids. Why go it alone? Isn't that the entire point of going as a group? Safety in numbers? And why doesn't she take this down guy's gun? You'd think guns would be pretty useful for scavengers. I mean, they're using these blow dart tubes. Do they not know what a gun is? They seem to be cautious and afraid of them, so I would assume they would. They don't seem like primitives because despite living in the forest and huts, their clothes are all manufactured and probably scavenged. Shouldn't all the kids be stripping this guy of everything on him immediately? What are they waiting for? Shouldn't they be like smashing them all over the head with rocks to make sure they're dead? Then the guy gets up when her back is turned and no one warns her.
You had one job. Just the one.
All the kids are sitting on the hilltop looking down. The entire point, I thought, was to cover her, and yet no one shouts. No one tries to blow dart the guy. Nothing. Every one of them just stares silently as this guy slowly gets up, slowly pulls out a gun, and shoots her. And wait a minute, why does this guy even shoot her? He somehow survived being thrown from a crashing spaceship, and his first inclination is just to shoot the person with their back turned before he even assesses anything about who they are, where they are. Nope, just blammo. There's a dozen different ways this scene could have been structured or written to have the same result, and it's almost baffling how bad and forced this scene is. Speaking of, Cass's ex-girlfriend Bix is randomly arrested by the police while they're searching for Cass for no reason. It's not like they know her relation to Cass and want to use her as bait. They just see her and say, hey, you're running away from us. Arrest her.
So, sorry, what now?
Everyone is running away from them. People are being shot. Things are exploding. The entire city is banging on metal to alert others that the police are coming. Why, out of an entire hostile city of people, they chose this one lady to handcuff? Well, it's because they want to have another contrived scene where Tim, her current boyfriend, the guy who ratted Cass out in the first place, dies stupidly. I mean, I don't really care because screw that guy, but he dies so stupid. He sees they have Bix handcuffed to a wall and he's like, hey, cut that out. And they're like, no, you cut it out. And he's like, nah, I'm not gonna cut it out. And he just advances on some armed dudes and, of course they shoot him.
What an idiot! What a loser!
Like, wow, T-Bone, what was the plan here? It's not like they were beating her up. She was just handcuffed to a wall. They could have just stood there and waited for 5 minutes and they would have left. And then, in a very weird scene, somehow Cass gets the drop on Cyril. I'm not really sure how Cyril knew Cass was going to be here, or how Cass knew Cyril was going to be here, but okay. Then, despite Cass having shot a bunch of Cyril's men already, he ties Cyril up and doesn't kill him for absolutely no reason. Come on, Andor, what are you doing? The immediate next scene is Cass and Skarsgård setting up a frickin' car IED, which they used to blow up and kill 3 more guys in a horrible explosion. Why the hell would they leave Cyril alive if they captured him? Now, the third and biggest problem with Andor is fuck Star Wars. As I said, everything that's good about it is good because it's not Star Wars. Starting off with a cyberpunk city is good, but then we have to spend the rest of the show in the contractually obligated Star Wars, it's not Tatooine, but it looks like a desert planet. It would have been fine if the show was just using Star Wars IP to tell an original story detached from all the Rebels and Empire stuff we've seen a million times, but no, it looks like we can't escape it. Because at the end of episode 3, Skarsgård turns out to be some secret Rebel recruiter who somehow knows who Cass and his dad is. How? Why? Would Bix even tell Skarsgård who has the part? Wouldn't she just tell him she has the part to sell? But Cass ends up leaving with Skarsgård to go join up with the rebels. No, why? Stop, please. No more Star Wars rebels fighting the Empire prequel garbage. We all know how it's gonna end. Just stop. So anyway, that's Andor. Basically, the refreshing opening 5 minutes and the interesting villains managed to keep my goodwill and interest throughout the first 3 episodes, despite a lot of the flaws and boring scenes. But now, unfortunately, it looks like Cass will hook up with the rebels and meet Mon Mothma of all people, and I just don't have high hopes for the rest of the show. Anyways, see you guys next week. Or this week, if you check out my streaming channel with Adam.